We are a divided country. We are deeply uneasy with ourselves. We're very pessimistic about the future. And we're angry about these perceived unfairnesses in society. The vast majority, as Richard says, are looking for change. But of course, what kind of change? It really depends who you ask. So let's quickly run through the methodology just for completeness. As I mentioned, 19 years of studying trust. We survey 33,000 people each year around the world in 26 markets. We actually do an additional 2,300 sample in the UK in January with an extra boost for high net worth and those on lower income. So we can see that divide between the haves and the have-nots, if you like. So what's the trust picture at a macro level? So look, what you see in this slide is the attitudes of the informed public. So these are people with high income, university education, and they're regular consumers of media. They're on the top versus the mass. And you see this divide in trust in institutions. This is the aggregate number of trust in business, media, NGOs, and government. And as it's tracked over the last few years, you see this gap kind of widen and shrink. And in November, we saw the gap at 24 points in attitude. This is the largest gap between what the powerful, if you like, think and what the mass think. It is a bigger gap than in Trump's America. Now, let's have a look, well, what the picture was in January. Look at how the jaws collapse. So what happened between November and January? November, we had the Chequers deal. We had a sense of confidence that finally we may be able to resolve all of the debate around Brexit, and we've got this massive kind of unraveling and a complete collapse of trust of the informed publics in the institutions, falling to just a gap of 10 points now. So how are people feeling? Well, not great, actually. 2/3 believe that this country is on the wrong track. And it would be wrong to think this is a binary story, that simply represents the people who voted to remain. As you can see, 43% of people who voted to leave think we are heading in the wrong direction. In short, nobody is happy. And I think what's most striking is this number on the right-hand slide. Only 14% of people in this country believe the system is working for them. That is, the pillars of society that support them simply don't feel safe. Hence this large number, 70%, who are saying they feel this sense of injustice. Now, Brexit is both a symptom and a cause. Arguably, I think it's more symptom than cause, and these are some points that I'll ask Mr. Blair when we do our conversation. But look, it has become, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a kind of lightning conductor. And since the referendum, people believe that actually as a country we've got much angrier about politics, much harsher, much brutal. We've fallen out with friends. And many of us now fear that this anger is going to spill into civil disobedience and violence. So you can imagine what the picture is like then for political parties and leaders. And actually, this shouldn't surprise us when we see both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party fractured on Brexit, that Mrs. May and Jeremy Corbyn have seen a kind of hemorrhaging of support from their core voters. Theresa May's core has fallen by 10 points to 68%. These are people who would say they are natural conservatives in our study. And Jeremy Corbyn has seen a 12-point decline to just 56% of core Labour supporters having trust in him. And when you look on aggregate then, across the whole nation, his trust amongst the general public, 26%. The Prime Minister's trust, 35%. And it's no surprise then, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen, that 61% of people say their views are not represented in British politics. And actually a similar number say that they're not listened to. Now, we're seeing this pervasive pessimism also manifest itself in people's attitudes to the economic future. Optimism is in short supply. Since the referendum, the number of people, or the proportion of people who think they're going to be better off this time next year is halved. Only 11% in this country. And if you remember, gosh, you know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we remember Del Boy's mantra, this time next year we'll all be millionaires. Well, the truth is, nobody really thinks that anymore. Almost half of all people in this country think we are going to be worse off this time next year. So where is trust coming from in this picture? Well, look, as Richard says, and it really is quite striking, trust in my employer is now at 73% in this country. Compare it to the other institutions. Many people want their employer to provide the stability and the reliability that they feel they're not getting elsewhere in life. And as Richard said, there's a large number of people, it's up almost 20 points, who want CEOs now to take a lead, about 79 points in the UK. So what does this mean for the business-employer relationship? Well, expectations are very high. Do good in the world, treat us and pay us fairly, train us so we can compete for the future, protect us from the dangers of automation. Tell us the truth. Put people before profits. And I think it's really interesting on the left-hand side of the slide. It always used to be the mantra was put the customers first. Actually, what are people saying? Put the employees first. 65% treat employees well. 47% treat customers well. So in conclusion, it's a very mixed picture. And in many instances, a very bleak picture. But there's a real opportunity for employers to lead here, and perhaps a new quasi-political role for business.